Every world champion's worst race that year. We are back. It's been 5 million years since the last episode, but we're actually back now. So don't worry, yeah? I'm gonna try and make this one a bit. I feel like I can make these episodes way quicker than they were when I first did the first two. I feel the first two are way too long. So we're gonna speed run these, alright? Let's do it. 1970, Jochen Rindt was the world champion, and I can't do it, alright? I just can't do it. I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, and I just can't do it, alright? I can't. I'm not that kind of guy. R.I.P. Jochen Rindt. There's just no way. And the worst part is, it kind of has to be Monza. Because every other race he had that year, he cooked. Every other race. Like, you look at the stats, like, he did so well. This is one of the most underrated seasons probably ever. Yeah? Every race he won, he deserved to win. Every race he didn't finish, he had an excuse for. It's just, man. There's literally no good answer for this. All his retirements were out of his control, including the 13th in Africa, and he won every race he finished outside of Africa. So, there's literally no answer for this. I know you guys want it to be Italy, but it isn't. So I think Jochen Rindt is the first ever NA. It's not applicable. Sorry. We move. All right. 1971. Jackie Stewart was the world champion, and his worst race was the United States Grand Prix at Watkins Glen because he won the world championship with mononucleosis, which is a sickness, an illness he had, and constant traveling to the US. You know, it kind of caused him to get sick a lot. So yeah, it was very bad. Watkins Glen was not a good race for him. He was on pole and he finished a minute behind P1. He was in 5th at the end. It was not good at all. We move on. 1972, Emerson Fittipaldi's worst race of the season was Monaco. He was on pole and he finished P3 a lap down. It just goes to show how good his season was that P3 was, to me, his worst race of this season. We move on. 1973, Jackie Stewart's a 2-time world champion. His worst race of the season was Britain. He was shown absolute levels by Ronnie Peterson while battling for the lead. And the battle caused him to pull a Vettel Bahrain 19. He spun out and he finished 10th a lap down. It was his only non-points finish of 1973. 1974, Emerson Fittipaldi was the world champion. His worst race was a 5th place in Monaco. All of his bad finishes that year and his retirements were all justified by car issues. It's almost insane how he even won the championship by 3 points with all those reliability problems. Like, you just take away a couple of them and he'd have probably wiped the whole season. So it's crazy. But it's the 70s, so reliability was common. Poor reliability, rather, was quite common back then. 1975, Niki Lauda was the world champion. His worst race was a P5 in Brazil. It was the only honker I could find. All the other low points he had were once again out of his control. Okay, here we go. 1976, James Hunt was the world champion, as we all know. Anyone that watched Rush, you know the vibes. His worst race of the season was Monza. At least it was to me. So let me get this straight. Your title rival almost gets barbecued in the Nürburgring, and on his first race back, how do you respond? Surely you beat him, you know, show him who's boss, yeah, on his return. But what James Hunt decided to do was spin. Hunt spun out, packed himself into the gravel trap, DNFing. The same race Lauda came back. And not just a race where Lauda came back, but Lauda came back in front of the Tifosi. So the Tifosi watched you beat yourself in gravel while Lauda, who almost died, came back and scored a P4? P4. Embarrassing, man. Probably the most embarrassing one on the list. Anyways, 1977, Niki Lauda was the world champion, and his worst race was France, at least to me. He qualified P9, he finished P5. It was his lowest on-track finish of the entire year. Just like in years prior with other world champions, All the DNFs he had were completely justified, and he quit the team right after winning the championship in the last 2 rounds, so I couldn't judge him off of those either. We move on. 1978, Mario Andretti was the Formula One world champion, and his worst race of 1978 was Austria, a race where his teammate at Lotus, Ronnie Peterson, absolutely wiped, and he would have probably at least gotten a P2. But he decided to throw caution to the wind. He raced somebody too hard on lap 1, got taken out by his own doing, and what could have been an easy podium was a DNF. So I hope I find the clip of it. I'm gonna play it if I do, but poor. Anyways, one last world champion remained in the 70s, and his name was Jody Scheckter. The South African won the 1979 championship for Ferrari, and his worst race of the season to me was Watkins Glen. Gilles Villeneuve put a lap on this guy in the wet in the same car. Jody basically pulled a Bottas Turkey 2020 without the spins. He was just not good. And granted, can you really blame anybody for being slower than Gilles that weekend? He completely wiped the field. Completely cooked the field that year at Watkins Glen. But you were in the same car as him, Jody, so it looks worse. It looks worse on you. Scheckter got absolutely cooked. Villeneuve destroyed him. I'm telling you, it was the 70s version of Turkey 2020. The only lucky part for Scheckter is that I think he had already clinched the world champion. He did. He already clinched the world championship going into that race. So maybe he was just taking it easy. But a poor performance is a poor performance. So there you have it. That's every world champion's worst race that year. 1970s edition. Stay tuned for the 1980s. We're going to speed run this series, guys. Intern out.